A challenge. The dust of the marching army blotted out the sun. The Greeks came with their chariots and bird-swift horses. They came carrying bone-sprung bows, gold-hilted swords, and ox-hide shields embossed with flashing bronze. They marched towards Troy, and earth groaned. The sun burst through, lighting spear points and the plumed helmets of eager warriors and the glistening coats of the prancing horses. It was as if plain rippled with fire. Achilles and his men laid around, played games, or watched the horses. They heard the roaring horde suddenly go quiet as the chieftains faced the mighty wooden gates of Troy. From the highest towers Trojan sentries sent news of approaching armies to King Priam. Hector, impetuous and anxious to begin the battle, ordered the clan leaders within the walls to prepare. The mighty wooden gates were thrown open and the Trojan army poured toward their chosen position, a hill called the Tomb of the Dancing Myrmidon. Warriors were as many as the leaves in the forest. The Trojans roared their battle cries, clashed sword on sword like the war drums. The Greeks moved silently forward into the rising dust, unable to see beyond a stone's throw. Swords held low and ready, spears poised, javelins balanced, arrows nocked, bowstrings taut. They awaited their chieftain's command to strike. Paris stepped out ahead of the Trojans' ranks, and leopard skin on his back, a curved bow and a sword slung on his shoulders, and his hands 2 bronze-headed spears. He challenged any Greek hero to face him man to man to fight it out. Menelaus, whose wife this man had stolen, leaped out of the chariot to confront him. Happy as a hungry lion facing a wounded antelope, Menelaus accepted the challenge, but Paris, seeing who faced him, was afraid and slunk back into the ranks of Trojans. Hector, his brother, shouted, "Pretty boy! Seducer of women! Were you born to shame us? You pitiful coward! You'd be better off dead. The enemy will think we make a man a leader because he is good-looking. They'll mock us because you have no guts. Be a man if you know how." In a fury, Hector pursued Paris until he could back away no more. "You're only good for going into another man's house and seducing his wife. You brought shame on your father and a curse on our city. You're afraid to fight a man whose wife you stole. Your long hair won't help you, nor your precious goddess Aphrodite. You're not worth a spit." Paris saw only stony faces of those who heard Hector's contempt. Trying to calm his brother, he touched his arm. "Did I ask to be handsome?" Hector turned away in anger, then. Paris followed. "Am I not as warlike as you, as gifted with sword and spear? But if you demanded it, I will fight this duel." Paris raised his voice so that all could hear. "The man who wins Helen and her wealth." The stony faces began to soften now. "Then our leaders may make a treaty. We will stay in Troy, and the Greeks can sail home. I will fight for that." Hector stood between the 2 armies and asked that they all be seated while Menelaus and Paris fought. Hector also suggested terms that would lead to peace and an end to the war. No one from the Greek side wanted to answer. Then Menelaus spoke. "I have suffered the most of all of this. I agree that the Trojans and Greeks can make peace. The real feud is between Paris and me. One of us must die. Fate decrees it will be him. Bring sacrifices, and bring King Priam to witness the oath. We don't trust his sons to make a blinding promise. Bring a ram and an ewe, and let the oaths be sworn." The warriors roared their approval and sat facing one another. Helen and Andromache, Hector's wife, watched from the towers over the gates to Troy. Helen's eyes glittered with excitement at the coming battle, pointed out to King Priam the mighty warrior she knew. Menelaus himself, Ajax and Agamemnon, Diomedes, Idomeneus, and Odysseus. Priam was then escorted down between the armies. Offerings were made to the gods, and the oaths were sworn. Hector and Odysseus measured the ground. The watching armies prayed for an end to the war and for their own safe returns home. Hector, turning his eyes away from the helmet held out by Odysseus, felt for a stone and decided who would be first to throw his bronze spear. The stone fell to Paris. The soldiers waited now, silent.